Welcome to the pit. Let's go save some lives.
So, firstly, congratulations on the show's success. And um, personally, I would say it's the biggest surprise of the year for TV lovers. And one of the biggest contributions to making that such a success was word of mouth playing a huge role. And you see online through Twitter or other socials where of because it's a weekly TV show and it's 15 episodes, it had enough time to really find its audience and really, I guess, grab that niche. And with the finale just recently aired, it's great to, reflect on how the show has come out, and especially when you've been a part of filming the show like months before, and you don't know whether how it's going to land or if you'll find anyone or not. So do you mind sharing your personal feelings of seeing the reaction, the response to the show, and how the cast as well as yourself is feeling?
Yeah, it's it's been really fun to see the growth in audience members because, when it first came out in January, um, it was a slow growth. And then I think February, people that I used to work with, because I'm trained as a nurse, people that I used to work with, like in Colorado when I worked in Colorado or in San Diego when I worked in San Diego, they're like, "Oh, I s I seen you on a show." And then by March, I had a lot of people reaching out, medical and non-medical, and I think that's when I started knowing that it was really big because it's people that yeah, especially if you get the non-medical people interested in a very highly technical medical show, it's going somewhere. Um, and then by April, it was cool to see just like on the forums or online, people are like, especially after the finale, they're like, there's no more the pit Thursdays, but it was cool to see people looking forward to it every week. Like it used to be when TV shows released like that, before we had the streaming model where you could just binge
Mm,
everything. And then I had a couple of people that I had worked with, in the medical field too, that they were like, well, I'm gonna wait for it all to be aired so I can just binge it, because some people like they only have that amount of time and that's how long they can keep their attention span for. Um, but yeah, no, it's been really cool. And a lot of it is word of mouth because um I just feel like I would see it online. Like people are like, you have to watch the pit. You have to watch
mm,
the pit. And it was just really cool to see. I think the rest of the cast is like super excited about it. And um, yeah, we had no idea what it would be, when you first start,
mm.
but it's really cool.
Myself included, I was really pitching it to my friends and online or in person to watch it. Because personally, I'm not someone that grew up on medical dramas.
Mhm.
It's just by, I guess, just how it was. And of course, I was aware of shows like Grey's Anatomy and ER just by knowledge of, in culture. But
Yeah.
it's like, it kind of took me my breath away in watching it. Of course, it's marketed and I guess it's intended to be like an accurate, somewhat realistic show that doesn't want to shy away from what is like in the healthcare system,
Yeah.
especially in the current state of America where hospitals, where I feel like it's always been a case where it's been struggling and understaffed. And I'm sure you can attest to that as a nurse yourself. And speaking of as a nurse, which was an interesting fact to learn about when I went through your IMDb profile.
Mhm.
And um, I wanted to know, as a nurse, in what way does that help inform you for your role and audition? And I imagine your audition it probably differs compared to other people having that in mind.
Yeah. So I had auditioned for this show in a non-medical capacity. And then I also work as a medical advisor on other shows, randomly, occasionally when they have scenes that require hospital equipment or medical actions. And through my contacts through the medical advising field, I was contacted by producers, and they asked if I wanted to be on a show for multiple months. And I have an agent and manager as an actor, and that's actually always my priority. I've been an actor longer than I've actually been a nurse. Like I knew I wanted to do acting since I was young. And so I said I can stay on for a few months, but it was Monday through Friday. And I was like, I had a really good season before the strikes. Like I booked several different roles and they weren't nursing. So I was like, I have to be available to do that, to keep working with my agents and manager. And so I got on the show as a medical advisor, and I helped participate with boot camp, and then on the set I would kind of help set up patients or teach. There's some new equipment that they had gotten, some new monitors that I knew how to work with. I would teach them how to use that, or the Alaris pumps that we use for delivering medication through a drip. So just all those little things I would help with. And then in the background, you see us, I would help transfer patients because I just know how to do that without injuring myself. Then it came up that there was going to be a character written, and they reached out to me and said, we might have you play this character. And so it was in Noah Wiley's first episode, episode 4. So there wasn't really too much of a breakdown, but being a nurse, she is a nurse, Kim, it almost felt like playing a level of myself for the show. And then eventually when I had bigger scenes, I did have to do like a Zoom audition, which was so fun, working with casting, and got to see a little bit of growth with my character beyond just saying like medical lines. Yeah, so it was a really cool process, and it was a very unique process. But it's kind of about being in the right place in the right time and just having that training in both capacities that just worked out.
And how was your character initially described to you? And as you went to, I guess, go through the table reads yourself, and as the show progresses, did that change in any capacity, like to a notable extent, or did it just feel like a natural progression of just how she is?
It definitely felt like a natural progression of how she is. With the table reads, mainly it's the main cast that does the table reads, the series regulars, and then we get the production draft. And the way she was described, there wasn't really, like I said, a breakdown. It was kind of like, I think because they were probably going to write an official breakdown, but then they never did. But I think the character is very close to how I come off naturally,
Mm.
because I was just there being myself, and was told that I was going to be brought into the show. So I'd like to say that Kim is bubbly and kind, and wants to provide the best nursing care, and she's empathetic.
And I can kind of see that as well, with I think one of the scenes when Whitaker kind of messes up his uniform and you offer extending hand, but he just outright refuses. And as a nurse and an actor playing a nurse, how do you get into the mind of one knowing you already are one? And do you try to avoid what you already are, or just try to recreate a new persona or something?
Um, Slightly create a new persona, because um, I think I'm a flirty person naturally, but maybe not quite as flirty as I mean, not that Kim's over the top flirty, but you know what I mean?
Mm.
She does go out of her way to try to help Whitaker feel a little less embarrassed with,
Mm.
he was wearing very short scrubs when she saw him in episode 9. She's like, here's some scrubs that actually will fit you. Um, but yeah, the rest of it is pretty close to how I do feel like, when I worked as a nurse. And um but I still like to create a different personality, because
Mm.
it has to feel a little bit different from how you are naturally. I don't It's just part of the acting process, at least for me. Otherwise it's like
Uh,
too close to home. Like when I first
mm.
read the script, it felt like it felt like I was at work again, and it was heavy. And I worked through COVID, and that was a really hard time for me. Still working through some of that trauma and whatnot. So it's nice to be able to separate it a little bit.
And the Pitt as a show, I feel like is from my what I've seen, it's one of the rare shows or films that really addresses the effect of COVID especially in such a grounded way, where you see how the hospital livelihood, the environment has clearly suffered and hasn't really improved much. If anything, it probably got worse, especially with nowadays the political state. And I was wondering, because the show kind of is portrayed as an accurate and realistic drama, as I mean, film critics, TV critics, they're one thing, but I feel like nurses, they're probably will be the harshest critics or the most honest about whether it actually does respect it or not. So I wanted to know from your perspective, how does the show really convey and compare to how it was for yourself when you worked during COVID and in general as a nurse?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, the scenes that they have that are the COVID flashbacks. Well, at least in Los Angeles, like it was bad, but we, at least at the hospital that I worked at, um, we had enough, PPE. I do remember, taking off the N95s, and we just had one for the day. But there were some hospitals where you had that N95 mask and you had it for the month. You know what I mean? Um, but we were allotted one a day, and we had at least enough gowns for a while, and enough space for a while. I do know people that worked during COVID in like New York, and that was much it seemed much, much worse. It just depended on which hospital you were at and which area you lived in and worked in. Um, so I'd say that was pretty accurate. The boarding that happens in the emergency department, so like where patients just stay down there for hours and hours waiting to get a bed upstairs, sometimes days, that's 100% accurate. Um, I don't know. It's just gotten worse over the years. Like I graduated back in like 12 years ago, and initially I don't think there was really patients staying down there for days. Like we would get beds upstairs way quicker. And then I just noticed, like, especially after I moved to California, during flu season, especially, the hospitals would get really hit hard. And sometimes we'd have patients down in the ER for like, uh, longer than my shift, which is pretty long. You go into ER because you're like, I get to meet a lot of different people. I get to take care of a lot of different patients, but you would have these patients for like your whole shift. And sometimes if you work the next day, you'd see them the next day. It was like working up on the medical floor. So I think that's a huge problem, and that just seems to be getting worse, honestly. Um, yeah, I don't know, it's not good for the patients. They don't feel, you can't really get comfortable, especially if you're in the hallway of an ER. That happens a lot, and the pitch shows that. They show a ton of hallway patients, which is absolutely true. And it's like, there's reasons we put patients in the hallway, but Yeah, it's very, very accurate. Um,
I mean, I would say, I mean, I'm based in London, and I would say it's the same experience. Like, whenever I've been to hospitals, I've seen it's the whole way patient is extensive, and like they do the staff, reception, they do tell you that it does take a lot of hours, maybe days. So it's kind of I don't know, it's an unfortunate, I guess, situation or in general
mm,
feeling of the environment where the patients they need the care, but and the staff they really want to, but they realistically can't because of things outside their control, especially when
yeah.
it comes to the hierarchy. And so, speaking about the accuracy, were there any like particular props or something like I don't know, kind of a sequence interaction that really surprised you as something that, oh, I did not expect them to do that kind of level of research or detail that you're willing to share?
Oh yeah, there's some definitely new procedures that, you don't see. Like the I think it's episode 10 where they do a canthotomy on the eye. So when the baseball player gets hit in the eye and he has that hematoma and they cut part of the eye to relieve the pressure. Um, that I've never had seen, but I know it's done. It's just very rare. So that was cool to see. And like they made of that actor, they made a whole prosthetic head. So it looked like him. It was so kind of creepy. Like the props on this show are amazing. The makeup on the show is amazing. They deserve all the Emmys and awards, but um that was really cool to see. Um Also when they did it was episode I think 2 or 3 where the guy comes in with a nail sticking out of his heart and it's like beating with his heart. That was really cool to see. And for that actor, they created a prosthetic of his chest. So they actually made a mold of his chest. They got like all the little like moles that he actually has. So it really looked like his chest. And then when they cut open, they had this like the lungs there and they had the heart there. And
Oh, wow.
in trauma, we do like if sometimes in dire situations we have to um, crack the chest and then actually like massage the heart to help it beat and actually help the patient get to the OR for more definitive care. But the way that special effects had the lung and they were kind of there's a tube attached and they were at the end of the bed kind of like making the lung inflate and deflate and they were making the heart beat with another device was really really cool. And also you really don't see like cracking the chest. I would say probably seen that
Mm.
5 times in my career. Yeah. I mean, you've heard about it more, but like that it's been like my patient or like I was helping with the case, so it's not that frequent. Um, I'm sure there's some other ones that I was like, oh, I haven't actually seen this before. That's really cool. But it is like, I think, when I was in nursing school, I'd watch House MD and I would look up some of the cases. I mean, House MD is definitely not accurate to where the like hospitals work, but they did have very like interesting cases. And then after I would like look up, oh, let's see like what these symptoms are and what the treatment is. And there were a couple of times I remember that I was able to kind of like figure out what was going on with the patient based off of like the little research I did on a more rare disease because of House. So I hope, and I think the Pitt is going to offer that same um, kind of learning for people going into nursing or becoming doctors too, because it's just so accurate and there's just so many interesting cases.
And I think one of the cool details within the show is like there's this kind of philosophy or principle as a emergency nurse or doctor where you have to treat a certain amount of patients within the hour that I think Dr. Robbie and Dr. Mohan, they kind of had that conversation about,
Mhm.
where Mohan personally, she was giving more time to specific patients than Robbie was agreeing with. And from your experience as a nurse, how is that kind of like? Because I understand that you have to go through a lot of patients in quick succession, but also not to the point where you kind of remove your own empathy for each one or make any patient feel like they're individually not being cared enough for. How do you
Mhm.
balance that kind of spectrum and trying to make sure your personal empathy doesn't get compromised, even though the job and the demands kind of try to wedge that kind of personal balance within yourself?
Well, yeah, as a nurse, we have four patients that four rooms that we um, have to take care of. In other states, nurses are assigned more rooms. Sometimes, when I worked in Colorado, sometimes I had five patients at a time or like six, but like the other two were really stable, like your sprained ankles, like, you didn't have to give them a lot of TLC. As a nurse, I found that, when I would be, if I can be doing something while talking to the patient and relating to them, then I wouldn't get too far behind, right? So I'm starting an IV, I'm talking to them, I'm, maybe making a joke, trying to distract them from getting an IV in their arm. As far as doctors, though, they don't really have, it doesn't seem like they have a cap on how many rooms they have. It's basically like most of the hospitals I'd worked at, they would just pick up patients in the kind of order that they were slotted. And sometimes patients that were sicker would be slotted higher. And then, or if we were really worried about a patient, we would hand the chart to them directly to be like, can you go see this patient now? So they have a lot more demands on, okay, I need to see this patient and make some decisions on, do I need to do a consult? Which imaging I need to order? Which medications do I need to give because they're breathing really heavily and maybe they have fluid overload and they need Lasix, or maybe they need BiPAP, which is a machine that kind of forces air into your lungs. So they have a lot more demand as far as like they're constantly being pulled. Um, but I think as a nurse, it's easier because we do spend more time with the patients because we have less that are kind of like grabbing our attention. I usually only have to work with like whoever the doctors are for my patients, but doctors have to talk to other doctors, the admitting doctors, the other nurses of their other patients, respiratory therapy, sometimes pharmacy, to be like, okay, which is the best antibiotic? We think this patient has this kind of antibiotic resistant bacteria. Which one should we use? So they're just, it's a lot for them. So I can see why sometimes they just have to come in, be very like direct to the point and then leave. But I notice a lot of doctors, if they like sit down and kind of like take a moment with the patient feels better cared for. Actually, Dr. Robbie does tell that to Dr. Mel King in a funny moment. I don't know if you remember when he was like, she's standing up talking to patient and he goes like this and she's like, and she kind of sits
Yeah,
down because she gets it. And it's just like that simple move of just sitting with the patient for a little bit just makes them feel like it makes the patient feel like you're not just like waiting to rush to the next thing, even though they are, because they have to. There's just no stopping for them. But I think I think you can still have empathy and still get the job done, but it is very hard for doctors because they're just getting pulled in all the directions.
exactly. And I imagine um, one of the things I assumed were like, janitors or people who are just doing regular jobs that are not involving healthcare besides in terms of maintenance, I guess, where they kind of notice a lot of things around the environment that most people don't. But as a nurse, I imagine you also have that kind of observational skill that a lot of people probably won't pick up on. Is there anything in particular from your experience on set and working in real time where you've noticed certain things that you wish were brought up more and were given more time or interest to?
Mm. Um, I think I guess if we're talking about like the grand scheme of like the hospital, um, I mean the background in our show is really great. Like they had you don't see them too much, but they had two people dressed as respiratory therapists. We had one maintenance worker. We had a couple of environmental services or, housekeepers. And you can see them working a lot in the background. And then, phlebotomist and then like what you consider like EMTs, like your medical assistants. I think it'd be cool to see. I mean, and not every hospital has this too, because I've worked at hospitals that don't, but like an ER pharmacist, there's usually only one, but they do help come and bring in meds for codes. Um, yeah, but everybody, yeah, I love that we have a spotlight on Esme, who's uh, environmental services or housekeeping or what have you. Um, and I know I've had a lot of people reach out to me saying they need to show the respiratory therapist more, which definitely, because we do use them a lot, but usually there's only one or two in the ER, you know what I mean? And sometimes they have to go upstairs to codes, at least where I've worked. They're kind of like a rare commodity as well. But I think the show does a really good job showing everybody, from the smaller roles to the bigger roles.
And as a medical advisor, when producers, writers, or whoever, even cast members come to you for information or tips, what is the most common that you're asked about? And yeah,
Let me think. Like just like, well, especially for the nursing cast, it would be like, okay, how do you, like, what are the steps to starting an IV and getting blood, right? Or for the other medical staff, like, how do you do an assessment? Like, where do you start first? Things that like feel, oh, I've done this so many times, I just like know how to do it. But just things that like them as actors, they're like, I want to do it accurately. Um, like Fiona would be like, okay, so when I'm palpating the abdomen, like what should it feel like? She wanted to really know like what a good like abdomen felt like, and what like if something was wrong, what would that feel like? You know what I mean? She just wanted to be able to be like, okay, this is normal. I'm not giving it any attention, or okay, I'm feeling something here that shouldn't be happening, or shouldn't feel like that. Um, yeah, mainly like assessments, and then also knowing what the numbers on the monitor would mean, because sometimes they're looking up at the monitor and then they're deciding to make a decision on the show. So just kind of just pointing out those things of like, okay, yeah, you see that number up there, that's the heart rate monitor, that's very fast, that's abnormal. You clock that, and but it's not so abnormal that you're like, let's go. Nobody's ever like that. Everybody's totally at the top of their game. It's like calm efficiency, and it's just calmness under pressure. But yeah, so mainly assessments and things that you would use for assessment to make a medical decision. Yeah.
and I saw one of your other interviews where you mentioned that of course you mentioned earlier here that from a young age acting was like your calling, and but then you took on the role of a nurse in general, and that from your other interviews, you highlighted that while other actors are getting jobs as bartenders, waiters, waitresses, and such, but yours was a nurse. Why exactly did you pursue a career in the hospital? And is there like a specific passion that you had for it, or was it strictly because of, I don't know, was there any kind of personal um yes preference over that instead of like regular corporate hospitality, if that makes sense?
Oh yeah, yeah. Uh-huh. Um, so I was in high school. I was a figure skater when I was younger, and I thought I wanted to do sports psychology, like in the meantime also being an actor. And then I kind of realized, oh, I don't really like sitting that much. And the university that I was at had a really good nursing program, and my dad was like, why don't you look at the nursing program? And um, they kind of wanted me to have like a stable degree, even though I wanted to go into theater at first. And I did take some theater classes in college as well, but I I started taking anatomy and physiology, and I loved it. Like I just remember being in cadaver lab and being like, wow, the human body can do all these things. And I also like the whole draw of psychology to me is just talking to people. I really like to talk to people. And so nursing was kind of like, wait, this combines science, which I didn't know I had an aptitude for. Um, because then I was diagnosed with ADHD around that time, but with ADHD, it's like when you find out your passion, you can kind of like focus on that. And then I also figured out the best way that I learned. So I knew I had to be in the front of the class. I had to be constantly taking notes. And then I would also use a recorder to take notes. And then I would listen to lectures after. And then I just like, I thrived in the nursing program. And I do have a passion for it. Like I do, it's, you know, I don't think, I don't know, I have a hard time believing that you could do nursing without being passionate about it. I think you would burn out really, really quickly. Um, but like while I was in nursing school, I was doing plays when I had time, so I was able to fill like both of my sides of my brain, I guess, my scientific side and then my creative side. Um, but it worked out. And my dad actually was the one that was like, if you become a nurse, you can work on the weekends and act, audition during the week. They always need nurses and you can get a job anywhere. And he was so right. And I'm very grateful that he said that, because I've gotten to do a lot of really cool things that, it's not your normal way of getting into acting, but it was the way that I was supposed to get into it, I guess.
It's nice that you mentioned that you have that kind of creative and scientific kind of split that you managed to balance out, because that's something that I personally had to go through as well. Where my undergraduate, I studied biomedical science,
Oh,
and
nice.
but then it was during COVID, so I kind of halfway through, I kind of lost interest, especially with everyone ice skating at the time. And by then, I found my passion. Well, it's something that I've always been there was for storytelling. I just never really had I guess, the bravery to or courage to go for it. And then I switched to
Yeah.
studying film, and I'm doing journalism, and I'm trying to get into full-time acting soon as well.
Nice.
So it's nice to see that other fellow creatives can manage to come from STEM backgrounds, especially when
Yeah.
it's kind of, I feel like for immigrant families or,
Mhm.
very culturally specific where you're kind of raised to become a doctor or a lawyer or such, and the arts is
Yeah.
something that we're kind of discouraged from. So it's nice to see that you can overcome that. And when I spoke with Alexandra, she mentioned a similar thing. I think she studied medical biology and graduated from
Mhm.
that. And obviously now you're both in the same show. So um,
Yeah. And
So
my
it's kind
mom
of
was an immigrant too. So, that was part of the reason I think they wanted to push me for something that was
exactly.
scientific, because it's kind of, yeah, for a lot of people, especially immigrant families that have struggled to help us, right? Help us kind of be raised stably and like financially stable. It's hard for them to imagine a job in the creative arts, but like now my mom she's so happy for me. Like she's pitching me movie ideas now, like because she sees that I can do it, but then she also knows I have nursing to fall back on, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, that's cool that you're getting into that.
And to dive into the show as it later develops, it's difficult not to bring up what happens later on, like it was the mass shooting event and how it kind of, uh, the consequences of that, the aftermath kind of fell onto your shoulders as a team. And I was wondering, I mean, as a nurse who's already had that kind of high pressure cooker situation or that intensive experience. How is it like trying to film that as a scripted kind of story? And I I imagine the sequences they were all shot quite fairly quickly, like within the day or so, rather than taking too much time, mainly because you want to kind of cross over the different kind of elements. Because like I think from episode 12 onwards, where a lot of different events were happening simultaneously. So
Mhm.
could you talk me through that process from the ground up and how it came to be for us to watch?
So, for episodes 12 and 13, there's let me see, we have other medical advisors on set. Millette, who also worked on ER, Tim, who was an actor before he became an ER nurse, and now he's retired. Um, Jamie, who's been a medical advisor for years, and I've worked with her a lot, and Jordan, who just got he's been an ER nurse for a while and just is kind of getting into this world. We each had different areas that we kind of would sometimes give some of the background actors actions, like, okay, but also it was all planned out. So it was crazy. The ADs did so much work, the PAs did so much work. They had a list of each um, MCI number and then what specifically their injury was and what medical interventions they were going to get. I mean, a lot got IOs because they were so, the intraosseous needles, because those are so quick to put in and you can infuse most everything through it. And a lot of people were getting blood because they were losing a lot of blood. So, and they would have these like bags that would have all their stuff in it, their endotracheal tube pieces. We put in the bags after shooting was over for the day. But yeah, we always have a doctor on set, but they are also helping the main cast do their actions. So we kind of act as their like helpers too. So it was kind of an all hands on deck, like props. Oh my God, there's props had to do so much work. Um, there's just it was just so much. It was wild. So there'd be like little vignettes, and we would see, okay, what are they going to focus on over here, or what should be going on in the background behind, you know, um, Dr. Robbie doing whatever procedure, or Dr. Abbott drilling in an IO, or so or yeah, it was a lot. It was chaos. I think we had like 100 and something patients, and then also we had to keep track of where they went. I mean, the ADs did, the PAs, they had this sheet, and you could see that like scene by scene, it would be like you would see the little gurney, and it would be like MCI number 80 like leaves the department to go to this elevator at this time. So we would have to see it so that we would then see that that space was available for another MCI to come in from the ambulance bay. It was, I mean, when I think about it, that month just feels chaotic, but we did, we did it with the help of everybody. It was such a big team effort, but it's really cool to see because I don't think any show has ever done anything like that
And
successfully.
for episode 12, 13, and I guess 14 as well, how much time did they take compared to the other episodes of the season to film
Oh,
and to
yeah, they took the same time. Each episode took
Mm.
9 days to film. Each episode, we
Okay.
were on a strict schedule. Like, um, the only thing that slowed us down, unfortunately, were the fires that were happening in California. So that
Yeah.
happened around episode 13. So we had to still finish our end date of February 6th. We added, I think, 2 days, like on a Saturday, just to kind of like finish because we had a wrap by February 6th. So,
Mm.
but they still took 9 days. Um, and sometimes like some of the episodes, you know, we would start at 7, most always start at 7 or 6:30, you know, for rehearsal. But sometimes we'd be out at like 5 or 6, like really nice, like quick days. But like for the MCIs, 12 and 13, those felt like slightly longer days because we just had to film a lot. Yeah.
I wanted to know your perspective on as a from watching how filming schedule works. And like with films, you notice it's like a 3, 6 month or 1 year shooting period, and then after that it's kind of over. It's just post-production, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And but with
Yeah.
TV, I imagine it's quite different because it's you're releasing a lot of episodes weekly, especially. It's like because you mentioned that episode 13 around the time it got kind of halted a bit because of the fires. So do you mind sharing how that timeline works? Like, are you still filming the final episodes while the first episode has just released, or how does that kind of function?
Yeah. So when we were filming, you know, say we film like, let me see, we filmed like episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, I think around that time. And then they so by mid-October, or maybe it was September. Yeah, mid-October we were able to see the first like episode. So what they did, they had a screening on Warner Brothers. The cast and crew got to go and watch, and it was great to see like, oh, this is what we've been working on. This is the tone. So that was pretty much finished by then. I think they still had a couple of other edits to do. And then we also were able to watch the second episode and the third episode, and then we watched the fourth episode the week of Thanksgiving week in America. That was like end of November, and so they're editing while we're filming. Um, they're they're editing, and the directors, you know, there were different directors for each episode. They kind of have a couple episodes off if they're a recurring director, but they would be like in the bay while we're filming something else. And yeah, for like episode 13, I think they were probably editing like 10 or 11 or 12, maybe around then. So they had most of the episodes like close to being edited when they first started airing in January. You know, we had, I think like probably 9 of them were at least edited by the time they premiered. So they had a lot of like leeway. Yeah.
Makes sense. And one of the, I think, from the outside perspective, when you see films or shows, they finish production and it finally gets to air and premiere. You see the cast and crew more often than not, they have like a family kind of feeling as a together,
Mhm.
there's a togetherness. But I imagine for a show like where everyone's playing a doctor or nurse, how does that kind of differ in any way? Like, is there more of a closeness for you, or I don't know?
No, I no, it feels like everybody's family because we were just, you know, we were working with each other so closely. You know, there'd be times where I wouldn't be working with one actor as much, And so sometimes I wouldn't see him as much, or we weren't in the same traumas, but yeah, we all got pretty close, and it didn't really matter if you're nurse, doctor, um, whatever your role was, social worker, yeah, surgeon, um, crew. Yeah, I think we all became pretty close because we were just with each other so much, and it was so immersive, and just so many bodies in the trauma rooms, especially, we're just all there.
And it's hard not to mention the main man, Noah, and as he's spearheading the show, watching him, especially that one sequence at the beginning of episode 12, when he gives the speech and kind of coordinates how everyone is going to manage the mass casualty. And
Mm.
he's mentioning there's color-coded areas and specific doctors working with specific nurses. Um, did that color code kind of translate to the actual filming as well, or was it just within the actual story itself?
Um, yeah, no, it did. So that was like part of the massive work that the assistant directors and the production assistants and the directors did to prep for this, and also the doctor medical advisors did for this episode. Um, so like the area that I was kind of in charge in was the red area. So like the very acute patients, the patients that you need to work on immediately or they are going to die. Then you see like um Javadi, she and McKay were in the yellow area, which was no, not the yellow, the pink area. Sorry. So pink is like a step below red. So it's like they need immediate attention within the hour or they could die. Versus like red is like attention right now.
Mhm.
Um, and then yellow is like where Whitaker and Dr. King were. And yeah, so all the patients in yellow were kind of more awake and breathing, and they didn't need IOs because they weren't as dire. They weren't all getting blood there. So yeah, it was very like satisfying in a way because it was so like meticulously planned, and you could see, okay, like especially with like makeup doing the wounds, people looked worse in red and in pink versus like yellow.
And to talk a bit about your career, you've also worked on 911 and I think The Rookie as well. Um, how was that experience like for both shows, and um, how does it differ from The Pit?
So 911 is like a it's a crazy show. You watch that show to kind of see what chaos is LA gonna go through today, because like there's every season, like there was a tsunami at the Santa Monica Pier. It's almost fantastical, but it's so interesting, and you watch it for kind of almost the sensationalism of it, right? Um, then there's like exploding fire hydrants in another episode, and um yeah, so that show is very it's very adrenaline heavy, and it's very quick. Like their pages are, sometimes they're like 80-page scripts for an hour long. It's really like a 50-minute long show with like commercials. um they work just like nonstop. Those hours are long. Sometimes we do overnights, you know, um, when I'm working as a medical advisor on that show. The Rookie is, mainly cop heavy, police force heavy. So that's more like sporadic. And when, one of the main actors gets shot or hurt or something like that, and they end up in the hospital. So yeah, it's not really as medically focused. So I would say sometimes those days are like easier because it's just, okay, we're going to just focus on these medical scenes and then you're done. Versus the Pit, it's like all medical all the time, little details, and the continuity makes it so much harder and more intricate.
Thank you. And
Mhm.
just a quick fun questions. So I asked Alexandra, and so I wanted to know yours. Which three characters you think would be the best roommates for Nurse Kim, and three who would be the worst?
That's a great question. Hmm, you know, I I love like students. Like when I worked as a nurse, like I loved having student nurses and even like medical students because like the more experience I had, I'd be like, oh hey, come check out this. So I think Javadi, just because I would feel like maybe a big sister to her. Um uh Samira, because she seems like she would be very clean, um, which is nice and kind of keep to herself in a way, but I would try to get her out of her shell, just be like, hey, let's go out. Um, and then um gosh, I do really like Dr. Garcia. Or Princess, well, Pearl has kind of got her whole like kid situation and sounds a little chaotic, but Princess would be fun um to be roomies with. I feel like they would get along pretty well, just like going out and having fun, going to concerts and whatnot. The worst roommates, um, hmm, well, if I mean, I was gonna make a joke about um I won't make it that joke. Let me
Oh,
see.
please say.
Well, I was like, well, if Dr. Langdon gets kicked out of the house because of what he went through, I don't know if I would want to deal with that drama. I'm just saying, Nurse Kim, she likes drama, but not too much drama. That's a little bit too messy. Um, hmm, Myrna, no, just kidding. No, you're talking about the the cast. Yeah, I don't know. I can't really. I think everybody's kind of cool in their own way. I would actually also would have liked to have been roommates with Dr. King too, because like I feel like she would have so many interesting facts and yeah, she'd just be fun. And I think her sister's fun. Like their
Hmm.
interaction was one of my favorites. Yeah.
I'm guessing you're
Oh,
abstaining from picking.
the worst. Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
maybe like the neurologist who cracks all the punny jokes because like I sometimes I take things too literally and
Hmm.
I would have a hard time with that. I'd be like, are you serious? Or oh, it's a joke again. Okay. That would get old for me, for Kim, I think. Wow, yeah, that's a great, it's easy to think of like best, but like worst is like who do I have strong feelings about? Even Santos grew on me. I loved her redemption arc. You know,
Hmm.
I would say this. Um, Nurse Kim, I think she's a little competitive, and I think the competition with Dr. Santos, but that's like a different competition, I think so. But I could see that being maybe an issue. Um, oh, and then love Dr. McKay, but if her ex showed up, would not like it. That's messy too. Not maybe not her fault, but her ex is messy. Her son's awesome though. So that would be like, but
Hmm.
yeah, I'm gonna say anybody who's a little bit too messy. Maybe not. Maybe not.
Hmm.
Okay.
Alexandra mentioned her worst would be Mohan,
Oh,
because
because she's kind of
because
like
she's a loner.
homebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, I've had, friends that have had roommates like that, and you're like, they just stay in their room and they don't like
Hmm.
cause any trouble. But I think Nurse Kim would try to be like, hey, we're going out. I'm making you go out. You seem miserable. Please have some fun. Life is more than just being really good at your job. So I think that Nurse Kim would look at that as a challenge. And yeah.
And my other question would be, I know you're working on the day shift in the show, but if you were to be moved, which three of the cast members would you want to join you on a night shift?
Oh, okay. Um, Night shift. Well, I was gonna say, well, Dr. Abbott already works nights, and he obviously rocks that because he finds comfort in the darkness. Like he said, he's basically the Batman of the ER.
Mm.
So he's already there, so I guess he doesn't count. I think Mateo, he just seems very competent. He'd be great to work with. I think he can deal with the harder patients that sometimes come in at night, the more unruly patients that have maybe had one too many drinks and are
Mm.
mouthing off. Um, he would be good. Let's see. Um, who's, I guess you would want people that are like efficient and just good under pressure. So maybe not Dr. Mohan did prove herself in the mass casualty, but you would want somebody that's like, because night shift you get traumas and you're like a skeleton crew. There's way less people. And so you have to be just like ready to just jump into a lot of situations where you normally have more staff for. Um, Dr. Ellis, well, she's already there. See, that's why she works it. It's like everybody in Dr. Shen, the same. Like they're just, you can tell they're just a slightly different breed, and you get it because they're just good in a skeleton crew kind of situation. Okay, day shift. I'm gonna say Dr. King, Dr. McKay. Yeah, because I think
Okay.
Dr. McKay would be, she would be good. She's dealt with enough adversity. She'd be good dealing with the harder things that come in at night.
And what about as actors, just for the night shift?
As actors,
Yeah.
oh, like, hmm. Actually, I think Issa would be great on night shift too. Um, and then Whitaker, I feel like he's scared of his own shot. I'm just kidding. But Garen would be great on night shift. I don't know. I hope we all just stay on the same shifts, but um yeah. And then Garcia, I think she would also be good. I think her and Walsh could like butt heads a little bit. Yeah. But Alex would
Um,
be great on night shift, just like her personality.
and any funny memories on set that you really look fondly on?
Um, I mean, I've mentioned it before. I really loved when everybody the crew did in November, like the mustache November, because um all the guys were growing out their mustaches, and then somebody 3D printed a really nice mustache trophy, which I would love to have had on my desk if I could grow a mustache. So
Who
that
won
was
that?
funny. It was, oh God, I'm blanking. It's in one of my videos, actually. It was one of the crew. He grew a great mustache. Oh, it was Peter. Yeah, yeah. It was hard because like we had to vote for all of them, and I'm like, I know who I voted for. Um, and then some
Who did
of
you vote for?
the oh yeah, I think I voted for Peter, but I also voted for Kirsten because she got a really nicely color match to her hair, fake mustache, and it looked really good. Yeah.
And I guess one important aspect of the show is, of course, it raises awareness about the failings of the healthcare system under, uh, especially nowadays, with under
Mhm.
capitalism or conservatism, that kind of strain. And one of the, I guess, details that I think is really important is how nurses are treated within the environment. And as we see with Catherine's character, Nestina, she got attacked by one of the potential patients. I
Mhm.
guess from your perspective, how do you feel about that? Seeing that kind of being addressed and given clear weight and emphasis towards it? Because I feel like the concern is a lot of people, especially when you're a nurse and you kind of have to either brush aside those kind of issues, especially as Dana shows, she just wants to move on from it, even though she should really try to prosecute that person who did that to
Mhm.
them. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think Dana trying to just brush it aside and just say I don't want to deal with it just kind of shows that um we for a while it kind of felt like sometimes people would think, well, you got into this field like you know you're dealing with patients that are having either um the worst days and emotions are high or they're under the influence, and um or they're having some kind of emotional breakdown. um it's kind of the whole like just suck it up thing that I feel like she's kind of showing. And I do think it's great that it's highlighted because it happens a lot. um I've been lucky that I was never attacked um physically, but yes, verbally assaulted. um and then you just kind of you learn how to deal with that. You learn that if you're going into a room with a patient that could be aggressive, you bring in you bring in additional help. But sometimes like you can't find anyone, so you have to kind of maintain your space. And then if they start verbally assaulting you and looks like it's escalating, you have to leave. um I think it's great that it's showing up because it's one part of the job that nobody likes to really talk about. But it happens, and it's especially, I think, especially after COVID, I feel like it's gotten worse because when I think about what us as a whole world went through during COVID, it's just like it was very traumatic. Like even if you weren't affected by COVID because you lived in a different area that was more rural or whatever, I think just the fact that the whole world shut down and we were all exposed to just so many horrifying um like I guess news, like you just didn't know what was going to happen, so I feel like everybody has some trauma from that depending how you dealt with it. I think a hospital also could be a very triggering place. So I think it's only gotten worse, and especially with the boarding and just the wait times. um yeah, it's wonderful. They clearly talked to they as like the producing and writers have clearly talked to healthcare staff, and they've really done their due diligence, which I know I and other nurses and healthcare workers are really appreciative of because they've told me, people I've worked with before.
And when working and if when you're dealing with these, I guess, uncomfortable situations, how do you personally like what goes through your headspace in terms of trying to assert yourself and knowing that you need to clearly do something about it, whatever to so it doesn't escalate? How do you try to avoid any kind of escalation?
Yeah, we every year we take like we have to take a class that kind of deals with like those kind of tactics. They don't always work, of course, that's like ideal world situations, but um it's you can kind of just tell after doing it long enough. You can just tell like when somebody feels like they're on edge. And then you just have to leave. Usually it's the people who are on edge that they're not like actively dying, obviously. So it's not like if you left the room, they're going to die. It's more just to protect yourself. Um, so you try to calm them down as you can, as much as you can. But if it escalates, you try to either get security involved or you do leave the room and then see if you can have like a superior either help you handle it or security. Security is so vital.
And since you mentioned security, you know the one of the early episodes where the ambulance got stolen. Does that
Mhm.
actually happen often, or
Not often, but it actually just happened within the last week or two,
oh,
the East Coast. Yeah. I if I can, I'll try to find you the article, but I was like, yep. Yeah, so the writers really did like they found a lot of things that were true. It doesn't happen too often, but I feel like I've heard of it before last week, like maybe one time before. So pretty rare, but definitely happens.
and are we able to because you mentioned that you had a cast and crew screening last year for the show. Are we
Mhm.
able to start like a mini petition for a nurse and doctor screening to see the show?
Oh, I think that'd be great. And I feel like they would probably start doing that because I know they've done it for other shows. They did do a finale screening at one of the hospitals, or maybe a couple of the hospitals in Los Angeles, which was really cool. Um, but yeah, hopefully they would do that next year as like a premiere or something, because yeah, so many of the healthcare staff, they really love the show.
And um, with season two confirmed as well. And I think one of my favorite things about television, at least the original model when it was cable, was that we had annual seasons and like you wouldn't need to wait 3 or 4 years for the next episode. And so I wanted to know from your headspace, is it does it help having that kind of less time between intervals and let you stay within character, or what's your preference like?
Oh, to have like instead of going right back into filming,
Yeah,
I think
do you prefer to have more time, or do you want to get right into it again, like within the next year?
well, yeah, so they're starting again in mid-June. So that was really, from first week of February, March, April, May, about like 3.5, 4 months off, which I think is good, because it was every day. And a lot of the cast, they couldn't really go anywhere. You had to stay in LA the whole time. So I think having some breaks in between is good because it was like 7 months straight of filming. And I think to get back into character, it's pretty easy, especially once they've played these characters for so long, you know. And the writers, they do the story beats and the storyline so well. I think it'll fall right back into place.
And I know you can't personally confirm, but should your character return in season two, is there anything in particular you would be interested or would love to explore further about your character?
Um, yeah, like I said, I loved having students. I think it would be fun to have like a nursing student, just because even for that, when there's a nursing student, they're only there for like 6 hours. Because they kind of just like get buddied up with you and then they follow you around. Unless you're doing like an externship, then they're with you the whole shift. But I think that would be fun to see, because we have Javati, we see her fresh eyes of seeing like the world of ER, but it would also be fun to see from the nursing perspective, right? Because they're the ones that are going to be doing the enemas and the less pleasant stuff sometimes too. So I think that would be fun if Nurse Kim could have like a student nurse. I guess that's, yeah, my main thing. Sometimes I'm like, it would be cool if she started considering becoming a nurse practitioner, because that's actually a normal thing that a lot of nurses consider when they're like, I've done so much with ER nursing. What's the next step? Or physician assistant.
Is that something that you actually have done, or is that you just
No, no. I thought about it, and I also thought about becoming like a nurse educator at one point, like way back when, but now I'm kind of more you know, I do a lot of writing and doing more stuff creatively. Um, but who knows, you know.
And just to slowly round it off, you have an upcoming project. Like I said at the start, it was a reporter. Do you mind? Are you able to share anything about it, or your role, or what's going on with the
Y-
project?
Oh yeah, so I have a holiday movie coming up. Um, well, it we just I just finished my part filming, and the little bit I can say, it's called High Stakes Holiday, and it'll come out around November, I think, in time for the holidays. I'm not a reporter for that. I'm a chef.
Chef.
And we're
Oh,
filming, yeah, yeah, and we're filming in Vegas, and that's been really fun.
you were a
So it's kind
reporter for one of your roles, right?
of it was a horror feature that
Okay.
hasn't come out yet. Yeah, and then I played a realtor a couple of times.
You're so generous to give so much of your time to talk to me. And there's one quick thing I want to say was uh, I can send a tweet later, but there was a tweet as the show was progressing that was talking about your character, and it was saying that there's this girl on the Pitt who plays the nurse, and Whitaker has a sort of flirtation with. She has a sort of a beauty usually only found in hostesses at suburban chain restaurants.
Um, I so one of my friends who she's involved in another fandom, actually of one of the shows that I work on, she sent me that, and at first I didn't understand what it meant, but it was actually like one of the sweetest things, and also most unique and specific things that have ever been said about me. So I was extremely flattered, and I love that. Yeah, that
And
was very cute.
and I guess that's kind of all for me. And